Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. So one of the I think one of the really unique things about Buddhism, about Dhamma, about the path of practice of Buddhism is that it's very focused in effort. The Buddha spoke many times about putting forth effort and about the results of putting forth effort. So this whole system of practice is really based on effort. It's one where we don't depend on someone else. We don't depend on some kind of external force to fix things for us. We put forth the effort and we fix things for ourselves. It's not, it's very similar to like developing a skill. It's like if you want to learn how to play the piano, you have to put forth the effort. You have to practice. You have to learn how to do it. You can't just, one day all of a sudden hope to be good at it, or, your piano teacher can't come and tap you on the head 3 times and make you good at it. It's something a skill we have to develop for ourselves. So it's the same with Dhamma practice, that we have to be putting forth effort into developing these skills, into working on our sila, our morality, our samadhi, our meditation, and our panya, our wisdom, and working on developing these aspects and these qualities. And they take time and they take effort. But sometimes when people hear effort and they think about effort and they hear all this talk about effort, that they may feel it may feel kind of heavy to them. You think about effort as real like sweat rolling from your forehead and like putting forth a lot of physical effort or going through a lot of physical austerities. And it's not necessarily like that. Just the effort, putting effort, just keeping our sila. So, say not stealing. For some people, it takes an effort not to steal. They see something they like, they want to grab it, and they have to make this intentional effort to stop themselves and not do it. Or, this can happen around stuff like telling lies. Some people, it's just part of they're just conditioned to tell lies. And so it can be difficult for them. They have to put in that effort. Nope, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to tell the truth. And so this is part of our path of practice is this putting forth effort. When I was a cow, so a cow is sometimes in the West, they use the term anagarika instead, but a cow is Thai. It literally means white robe. So this is what we call like the first stage in the ordination process at the monastery I ordained at Wat Pananachat. And so this is an 8 precept layman living there. So we have a little ordination ceremony. You're kind of part of the community. You're kind of moving into the community. And it's the first step. And then after that, you become a novice. And then after that, you become a monk. So when I was a Bacau, there was another Bacau with me, and he was Thai, but he had grown up in the West or grown up in a lot of international schools around Southeast Asia and the West. And so before we ordained, he went to go pay respects to all these very senior monks. We call them like Kruba Ajahns. So these, it either means like enlightened teachers or teachers that we really respect for their wisdom and their practice and their knowledge. And he went to go pay respects to several of them. I didn't get to go, but he went and one of the senior monks he went to see, one of these Kruba Ajahns, he asked this Kruba Ajahn, does it get easier? Like, does the practice get easier over time? And this Kruba Ajahn responded, he said, you learn to love the fight and you learn to enjoy the fight. And So some people, they hear this and it can be very inspiring to them. Yeah, just getting in there, you love putting forth that effort. But then to other people, can sound almost disheartening, this idea of, oh, it's never going to get easier. It's going to be more and more difficult. But it's not like that. It's not going to be more and more difficult. As we develop these skills, we develop these abilities, we still are going to be putting forth effort, but we learn to enjoy putting forth that effort. And as we get better at it, it gets easier. It's very similar to someone going to the gym. Say someone wants to get in shape, wants to, be really healthy, get some big muscles, and they start going to the gym, but they've never been to the gym before. They've never exercised. So in the beginning, it's very difficult. Just lifting very little weights is difficult. Their body's not used to these types of motions. They're not used to doing it, exerting themselves like this. So it can be really difficult in the beginning. But over time, as they stick to it, their body gets used to it. They build more strength. And so they're still putting forth effort, but as they get bigger, stronger, more into it, it's an easier effort. It's easier for them to do it. So even though, it still is effort, when they're lifting these really heavy weights, it's tough, but it doesn't feel as difficult as it did in the beginning. And also what happens is they really learn to enjoy it. So you see people who really get into physical activity, really getting to going to the gym, they actually really love it and it makes them feel really great. When I was a layman, we used to call it runner's high. The rush of dopamine or endorphins or anything you get from exercising makes you feel really good and good about yourself. And it's very similar with our practice. So in the beginning, we're not used to this. We're not used to working with our mind like this. We're not used to making the mind peaceful. We're not used to getting rid of difficult mind states. Before that, it was just a lot of times for us, it was just whatever mind state came up in the mind that was kind of ruling the mind, and we just have to go with it until it's changed. But so we're not used to that. And so it's just something new. But as we get better and better at this, as we get more skill at this, um, it becomes easier. We're still putting forth effort, but we get good at it. We get better at doing these things, and we're going to get a lot more happiness coming from it. So, this happiness we're going to be getting from our practice comes in different ways. So when we're, say, keeping our sila, like our morality, our kind of morality, the sila is all about our speech and about our actions. So it's all like the external things we're doing. When we keep work on keeping our sila, it can be difficult. Like I was saying before, sometimes we're so conditioned to go against that, that it's difficult to change those things. Not to say mean things, not to lie, not to steal. But you see over time as you're practicing it, it can really create a lot of lightness and relief and ease in our lives and happiness, because we don't have a lot of the problems which come with not keeping our morality, not keeping with our sila. We don't, how it is when you lie, the saying, was it, you have to tell 100 lies to cover up for one lie. So, once you start lying, there's all that worry. Oh, is he going to find out I lied to him about this? And so you tell more lies, and it becomes this kind of intricate web of lies. And it can just create so much stress, so much just suffering in your own life. But when you're really able to just, no, I'm not going to tell lies. I'm going to tell the truth. And you've just cut all that stress, all that suffering out of your own lives. Or, not stealing stuff. You steal something. There's always the worry, did someone see it? Will someone notice I did this? Will I get caught? Will I go to jail? Or, something like avoiding intoxicants. You don't have to make the morning after apology phone calls to people. There's it can create so much more ease and lightness in our life. And then when we start getting to the aspects of the practice, say for developing our mind, this is really going to give us a lot more happiness, a lot of ease in our life. So, bringing up mindfulness, you know how it feels when your mind is just kind of spinning out of control and you're just thinking about this and that. It can be a very, very unpleasant feeling. And that being able to stop that, being able to bring your mind back to peace and calm, or just not running away with that, it's going to create a lot of happiness, kind of a lot of suffering in your life. And as we learn how to not follow these different unwholesome mind states, these unwholesome moods. We call them the kilesa, or the defilements, like our greed, our anger, our delusion. Um, as we're able to stop those and cut them out and prevent the arising of them, or when they do arise, not follow them or cut them out quicker. Again, this is going to create so much more ease, so much more happiness in our lives. Yeah, we have to put some effort into doing them, but as we get the skill at doing them, um, it becomes easier and easier. So these greed, hatred, and delusion, these kilesas, in the Adita Pariyaya Sutta. So this is one of the three like cardinal suttas of the Buddha, one of these three big ones, and it's known as the fire sermon. So the Buddha was teaching these fire worshippers, and and he kept referring, because they were fire worshippers, he kept bringing this back to this theme of fire. And, he said everything is burning. Burning with what? Burning with the fire of greed, the fire of uh, hatred, the fire of delusion. And so these kilesas, they do have that quality. They consume like fire consumes, and they're hot and uncomfortable. Especially one of the ones you can really see it pretty obviously is with anger, is how unpleasant it is when you're angry. So, when you're able to cut that out and let go of that anger, you get this ease, this relaxed from it. And so again, this is one of those, the happiness you get from putting forth effort. So it does take, some effort to do it, but you do get this result, this happiness from it. And also when you really start working and developing your meditation, you're going to get these states of happiness and bliss, and like a sense of well-being and peace, and kind of unlike anything you've had before. And so so again, this is one of those happinesses which can come with our practice. And but so even though we we can see this, and we can on some level understand, there is this happiness, there are these results of our practice, but sometimes, the mind is tricky. So that same Pakao who went to see that senior monk, he also, again, right before our ordination, he was back at Wat Pah Nanachat, and we had this very senior Western monk come to visit. He had just been spending a decade living alone in the forest in Sri Lanka. Because this senior monk, he's like a real hardcore forest monk. Like when you think of forest monk, like this monk comes to mind. Like, he just loves living by himself in the forest, super austere. And when he came back from Sri Lanka, from living in the forest, he just went out to the forest in Thailand by himself, and he's been living there for almost 20 years. So he's really like I said, like you look at him and this is a forest monk. And so this other Bacau I was friends with, he asked this senior monk, oh, we're about to ordain, we're about to become novices. Can you give us some advice? Is there any advice you'd have for us? And this senior monk just looks at him and says, the mind is a tricky thing. It was just short to the point, and it's super true because the mind is so tricky. So even when we want to do something, the mind will have these tricky ways to get us to stop. Our kilesas will come up, our defilements will come up and try to trick us and get us to stop. So you can see it with, say, for example, in the lay life or in the world, say someone's on a diet and they really want to lose weight and they're really set on losing weight and dieting. But again, the mind can trick them. There can be that, oh, well, today was a tough day at work, so I'll just have a cheat day. I'll just go get myself a pizza and some ice cream. And then, oh, well, today's, a friend's birthday, so I'll just have a cheat day today. And then as this keeps going, there's always an excuse, and every day becomes a cheat day. And so again, the mind just has that way to trick you and find these excuses. So in the suttas, the Buddha talked about these excuses for being lazy of monks. And he gives a list, and it's not an exhaustive list, but he talks about, one of them is like, um, I can't practice because there's work to do. We have a work project. And, this is just something, comes up in every monastery. There's always going to be some work. Some monasteries have more than others, but, just that's part of life. There is some kind of work we have to do. Ajahn Amro likes to tell this story about from many, many years ago when him and Lumpur Sumedho went to Egypt and they visited this old Coptic monastery when they were there. And this monastery is 1700 years old. So it's an incredibly old monastery. And while they were visiting this monastery, the monastery was renovating and redoing their layman's dormitory. So Ajahn Amaro makes this point. He's like, look, the monastery is 1700 years old and the work still isn't done. It's just is never going to be done. So it's just kind of something which happens in life. And so, one of the excuses monks will make is, oh, well, or can make, your kilesas can make is that, oh, there's work, so I can't practice today. I've got to do work. Or the next one is we just finished work. I've just done work, so I'm tired from that, so I can't be doing some practice. And then another one is um, I'm traveling, and that time all the traveling was done by foot, but it's probably more exhausting flying nowadays than going on foot back then. So, oh, I'm traveling, so I can't practice, or oh, I've just finished traveling, so I'm tired from it. I can't practice. Or another one is, I'm sick, oh, I'm sick right now. I can't practice. And even though a lot of times when you're sick, you've got more spare time on your hands to practice, but that can be the excuse which comes up. Or, oh, I've just gotten better. I've recovered from being sick. Or also, there was, oh, I didn't get enough food on my alms round today, so I didn't get enough to eat, so I can't practice because of that. Or also, oh, I got too much food on my alms round, so I actually overate today, so I'm feeling heavy and not able to practice on that. And Lumpur Liam, who's my upajjhaya, my preceptor, the monk who ordained me. He's the abbot of Wat Nong Papong, the successor to Ajahn Chah. And he expands on this list. He calls it the excuses of junior monks. And he'll be like, oh, they'll say it's too cold, I can't practice. It's too hot, I can't practice. So of course it's not an exhaustive list, but you get the idea that, there's always these excuses which can come up to stop us from putting forth that effort. So it's important for us to be able to recognize that. And it just at some point have enough mindfulness and enough experience and enough wisdom. So one of these phrases you hear a lot in the Thai forest tradition is this phrase satipanya, like your mindfulness and wisdom. So having both of those, having that mindfulness and that wisdom, that awareness to know, okay, this is my mind tricking me. Here we go. This is a trick of the mind. And so it's important at first to be able to recognize that, but and then keep putting forth effort. There was this kind of one of Lumpur Cha's quotes, which is quite known in the sanghas. He said, if you feel like practicing, practice. If you don't feel like practice, still practice anyways. And which sounds great. Like that sounds really great. And some people can do that. Like some people can really just, no matter what, they're like, yeah, I'll just do it. And they can just force themselves like that, just grit their teeth, clench their knuckles, clench their fists and just go for it. But for a lot of us, it's not like that. So a lot of us, like when we're not in the mood, when we're not feeling it, we're not feeling inspired, or we don't have that desire to practice, we have to be a little more clever. We have to learn ways to bring up this enthusiasm, bring up this energy, this desire to practice. And again, it's one of these stories I tell a lot, but it was a teaching which really was really impactful for me when I was a novice. Was when Lumpur Pasano came to visit Wat Pananachat right after my novice rains retreat. And I went over to his kuti, a kuti is a hut or a cabin, a dwelling of monks. And I was chatting with him and I was saying, I'm not feeling really inspired right now. I'm finding it really difficult to be inspired. And Lumpur Pasno said to me, inspiration is a skill. And this was a really big teaching for me because I had always thought I should just be inspired. I'm living in a forest, I'm living in Thailand, it's monastery, everyone's practicing and stuff. Like I should be inspired by this, or it's the responsibility of other people or external factors to inspire me. And and it's not, it's actually, inspiration is something we learn to bring up. It's this mind state, this that we learn to develop and we learn to strengthen. And over time, we get better and better at it. So it's important for us to learn these little skills, these little ways to bring up that energy, to rouse that, chanda, that wholesome desire um, to practice. So we can do this by using our reflection, thinking, okay, how does it feel when I practice? How does it feel when I don't practice? So a lot of times, it's like, okay, when I'm practicing, even if I'm not good at meditation yet, actually, I feel good for having done it. I do feel it has some effect. I do feel good that I actually did do some practice. Or even, outside of formal sitting and walking meditation, just, in the daytime, how do I feel when I keep my sila, when I keep my morality, keep my precepts. I Buddha called it like the bliss of blamelessness. You have this happiness from knowing, actually, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm blameworthy. Okay, you're never going to make everyone happy. So no matter what you do and how perfect your behavior is, someone's not going to be happy with you. But that's not the point. The point is it is blameless what I'm doing. And you can feel, yeah, I don't have to worry about that. So say you're at work and something goes missing, you're just like, well, I don't have to worry about that. I didn't take it. Everyone knows I don't steal, so I don't have to worry about that. Or when we're really working on, getting our mind under control, getting rid of those mind states, those greed, the delusion, the anger, and cutting those out. How much better does that feel, It's like instead of, getting angry and going with it for an hour, just being able to stop yourself and not do that. So sometimes reflecting like that, how is this going to feel when I do it versus I don't do it can really bring up uh that chanda, that desire to practice. Also, you can reflect on, the Buddha, his life, his story. You can reflect on his teachings, like reading the Dhamma. You can reflect on the Sangha, like different um, monks in the time of the Buddha, monks or nuns in the time of the Buddha, or monks and nuns of the more modern time. A lot of times the more modern ones, for some people can feel easier to connect to because, you sometimes they're still alive and you can actually meet them. Sometimes, even if they're not alive, you've got you might have pictures of them or recordings of them or video of them. So for some people, it can make a feel a little more connected because it's a little more tangible. And sometimes just reflecting on them, reading a biography of one of these monks, sometimes afterwards, you've read it for a bit and you just feel like, yeah, I just want to go do some meditation now. I want to do some walking, want to do some sitting, or sometimes just having a chat with your Kalyana Mitta, like your spiritual friends, your Dhamma friends, and just chatting about Dhamma for a bit. Sometimes afterwards, even if it's nothing really new, just kind of where you're at. Sometimes afterwards, you feel really like inspired, like, yeah, I want to go do this. I want to go put forth this effort. Or one of the things we can do is reflect on death, reflect on impermanence, that life is short. We don't know when it's going to end. It can end at any time. But right now, I can practice. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Anything could happen. And sometimes reflecting like that can bring up this sense of urgency. And a lot of times, those distractions, those ways the mind is trying to get you to not practice, might not seem so important right now. It might be like, oh, I want to go do this or I want to go do that, so I can't practice. But then you think, well, which will be more important when I die? Or what will it really matter if I went and did this or saw this or, versus if I practiced? So again, we as we develop our practice and over time, we develop these little skillful means, these little like tricks or these little practices we can do to try to bring up this desire to practice, desire to put forth effort. And and as we and like I was saying earlier, as we put forth more effort and as we get better at this, we're going to get these, states of happiness, like the they call it piti sukha, like the rapture and the bliss in our practice. And having that happiness from the practice makes it enjoyable putting forth the effort. So even if the beginning or at certain times in our practice, putting forth this effort seems tough, or it seems like, um, you hear, oh, there's always going to be putting forth effort, but it gets easier and it feels better. And then it gets to that point where you enjoy doing it. It becomes fun. It becomes happy. It becomes just part of your life, practicing. So I'd like to offer that to everyone as a bit of a reflection for this evening.